What's up, y'all? So today we're going to be doing a quick video on this 91 Mitsubishi Eclipse. In between other bigger projects, I'm going to be sanding this car for a quick little paint job on the outside of it. All we're going to do with this car is paint it, lower it, and drive it, and sell it. So stay tuned.
Alright guys, so right here we're sanding the clear coat that's been peeling with a 220 grit. You can run over it with something a little bit more aggressive, lightly, but I didn't want to get too rough with this car. It didn't really have a lot of damage, didn't have a lot of necessary body work or primer needed, so 180 grit will be sufficient, but I had plenty of 220, so that's what I started with.
Every time we get together, you impress me. I like it when she say,
yes, Daddy, yes,
I like it when she say,
yes, Daddy.
And right here, I realized that when I was sanding the car, it's getting too close to the edges. Obviously, it didn't need to be sanded like some of the trim and stuff, so I started running the fine line tape around all the edges and just went ahead and taped up the car. A one-time deal for the tape and paper on this car was where I wanted to be at on time and labor and money, so I just went ahead and taped the car up as if I were going to paint it. And when the car was primed, I just applied the primer where I needed to and came back and sanded it before paint. And all the edges were already taped, so that's why I kind of stopped sanding and went to the taping procedure at this point.
Alright, so on the material on this car, cap key, however you want to say that, I pronounce it cap key, primer, and this Mini Mix 7, it's an acrylic urethane blend. Single stage gloss black 4:1 with a catalyst and 10% reducer if you choose to reduce it. Let's see, at the local Jobber paint supply, looks like this paint itself was 110 bucks and $40 for the hardener for it, so $150 in that half a gallon paint setup, which would be plenty for this particular all over. Primer 60 bucks and 40 bucks for the hardener, so $100 for the primer. And to be noted, we'll only use about half a gallon of this primer for this whole job, or maybe, well, actually less than that, so we'll be using less than $50 worth of the primer. This $20 primer spray can, I keep this on hand. Will hardly use any of this for this project, but right before paint, if anything's sanded through on the final prime, then I'll just dust a little bit of this over it before paint, in case I don't want to be spraying on like bare steel or raw plastic filler trying to spray paint on it. So this right here will cover real small places for that prep work. So right there, final bill on this material is 300 bucks, right, less than. So that's the dry, or that's the wet chemicals that's on this car. There's still the abrasives, and I'll be cleaning the guns with a thinner and sticks and cups, and you can kind of add up the nickels and dimes, but I'm saying less than $500 on this total paint supply on this car. On that, talking about paint for just a second, you can, an analogy for you, so you can, if I'm hungry, I could go eat, and I've got options. I could go to Taco Bell and I could eat some cheap tacos and get my belly full. And to me, that's representing this particular paint job. Like it's going to be cheap, but at the end of the day, it's going to look good. It's going to be shiny black. It's going to be a nice driver quality vehicle, and it's going to be a representation of the car's total value. You know, not on a ratio, no more, no less. Cause it's going to be a $6,500 car for sale at the end of the day. So, also, you know, I could go eat at a 5-star steakhouse and eat a $200 steak. It would taste a lot better, and it would be a better quality food, I'm sure, for my body. But at the end of the day, my belly's gonna be full the same. So, you know, not to say that there's the job dictates what we're doing here. So this 65 C10 is getting blasted down in the next couple days and brought all the way up from the bare steel. Epoxy primer, all the body work. We'll get a polyester primer on top of that. And whenever the process is going through the body work, it will get, you know, 2 to 3 coats of urethane primer on top of that. So you're talking about $1,000 in just primer on a job like this. That cab has, on this Toyota truck, you know, you can see it's all the way down. Even though it don't look much here, it's got easily, man, I don't know, 200 hours in just body work, metal work to the bed, and hundreds of dollars in chemicals spent on it already. You know, frame off, powder coated frame on that job. So, you know, the job dictates what we're doing here. So this will be a cheaper paint job, but it'll be great for what the car is. I don't even offer, as a matter of fact, I don't even offer this type of work to the public. Like I wouldn't do what I'm doing to this car to somebody's car and expect to be paid for it. Although it will be nice and decent, it's just not what I do. However, to you know, to get this car on the road, I might drive it myself through the summer until it sells. I'll feel good about it. You know, if you don't like the job, then essentially don't buy the car. Is how this will work. So I say all that on a rant, and I apologize. It's not throwing shade at anybody that does this type of work for a living, but you know, I'm just trying to explain the difference for if you're doing things yourself. There's a big difference in like a $500 paint job, $5,000 paint job, and a $15,000 paint job. You know, there's levels. So what's left here is priming in another dent I found, finishing priming on the rest of the car, on the rest of the hood and fender. That'll be its final prime, and well, then we'll be ready for paint.
So in the last time I primed this car, the first time I primed this car, I don't know, I forgot to turn the camera on or didn't. I don't know what was going on with that, to be honest with you. But either way, on this final prime, I'm kind of showing, you know, how I'm running the gun really slow. This primer gun particularly has like a 1.7 millimeter fluid tip, so it's putting on a lot of primer as I'm running that gun really slow and letting it build. So 2 coats of this primer is what this car is getting at this rate. I think on the first prime I had ran out of primer and had to go get some more, but anyway. So obviously we're priming all the damaged areas where I'd sand it down. This spot here is where all the, you know, I'd already primed the car once and sand it but I want to be applying this primer to any exposed steel, um, any raw plastic that would kind of soak in too much paint. I want it to that primer to build and fill any kind of damaged area. And then when sanding the first coat of primer, I found this dent here that I just didn't see, and I missed it somehow, and so I went ahead and mixed up some more primer for it as well.
Alright, so quick tip on this sanding this car with a DA. The orbital sander is not a substitution for a block, so if I was going to get this car a step better in quality, I would always be using like a block or a flat surface to sand every bit of this primer. So just note, like on a a higher quality job, I probably wouldn't even be touching the final prep work with a sander. I'd be blocking everything by hand, smoothing everything on the edges by hand, which I'll have to end up doing that on this car anyway. But just to finish sanding with the DA, if you'll notice a couple things, like I'm not going to set in one spot and just sand one spot very directly and intently like that. I'm going to constantly be moving this orbital sander around as if maybe it was kind of smoothing out a larger area, and instead of like sanding one spot very aggressively like that, I'm going to be constantly moving this sander around as to catch a bigger area and not dig out a hole, so to speak, in my material or a low spot. Like I said, that this orbital sander is no way to directly flatten it as well as I would by hand or blocking. So again, it's not a substitution for that. This is just a quicker, easier, cheaper way of doing it when I figure in my labor time on this job. So just a tip, as we're saying this car, not to be like digging in with a DA. It's constantly flowing and moving and trying to sand this primer as evenly as possible, even with the machine. So something to note.
Alright, right here I'm going to sand all the edges on the car. It's been DA'd with a 320 grit, sandpaper with an orbital air sander. But it's really important to get all these edges finally sanded out, and not only for the paint to promote to the edges and stick correctly, but it's just going to be pay huge dividends on the finish work of this car. And at this point, I'm taking the red Scotch-Brite that you see there and uniformly blending those edge scratches in with the orbital sand marks.
Alright, so after doing what I said I was going to do is back the car out, blow all the dust off the car, and I took that water hose that I keep in the paint booth and wet the floor down. Kind of started at the top of the walls, wetting all the walls down to run all the dust down to the floor, and kind of swept the standing water, most of the standing water out of here. Have to be careful not to like leave pools of water, or I don't want this water to like be standing where it'll step in and actually splash on the car or the panels that we're painting. So just a little tip on getting a clean workspace. I also use these for something like this. I use these little canvas wheel covers just to throw it over the wheels and tires, and I wet those down too, just because they can keep a lot of dust that can blow around and blow on the car. But from this point, we're ready to start spraying. I will go over all the edges and make sure all our paint or our tape's still in place. You know, if it needs retape, like right there, maybe coming up a little bit, so I might just have to retape some edges. And I have a wax and grease remover that you can buy at like a paint store, auto parts store, that I'll be wiping this car down for a final cleaning. If that's not in your budget, you can use a rubbing alcohol, so that works as well. It's just to make sure you get all the oil off the panel, and it's clean for paint. So after a wipe down, we'll be spraying some black. All right, so we're pouring our paint up. We've already talked about the paint and the primer that we bought for 300 bucks. When you buy your paint at the paint store, make sure they give you some free sticks, some mixing sticks. They'll hook you up with some free strainers, and ask for some mixing cups. Some places may give it to you, some places may not, but if you remember, we talked about it already. This is 4 to 1. It's a little unlevel on this table. It's got so much buildup. To a 10% reducer. You don't necessarily have to have the reducer, but it helps in this thick single stage. You can get some cheap reducer. Most of the time, just reducer. It don't matter about the brand, but usually 40 bucks for that. We've got, like, on this $500 budget we've got for this car, we've given ourselves $200 to kind of play with nickels and dimes. That's going to cover your sandpaper, Scotch-Brites. A lot of time for a single job, you can just go to like the part store or paint store and get a little job pack of what you need. A little 5-piece job pack of 180 grit sandpaper may cover your little bit of repair work if it's not too bad, and some 320 job pack and a Scotch-Brite job pack will cover basically what we've done to this car. It's basically just the finish work and a little bit of repair work. So we've got this $500 budget going on, so $200 to play with on stuff like that. This, you know, as with any job, you're gonna have to have plenty of air and some equipment to paint a car. There's just no way around that. This you're gonna be able to cover for $500. This is a Harbor Freight gun, like a $200 gun, or right less than $200. I have an $800 Seta Jet that this single stage paint's not going through. That's just more quality, higher quality jobs go through that. But for this, these little $200 guns work great. Make sure and stir this stuff up really good. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get you covered for in your shop equipment for $500. You're just going to have to find a shop or invest in what you're doing. So hopefully with this camera is going to work with the respirator.
Notice right here, I'm just going to spray that little spot just for test on how the gun's spraying this paint. Alright, so what's going on here, the same thing we talked about with the primer, is just a slow buildup of the paint material on the car. For this all over job, I'm going to have a pretty wide fan pattern coming out of the gun and a 50% overlap each time that pattern goes back and forth across the car. Places like this where you have to really be careful when you don't disassemble the car, you don't just have a flat panel to paint. That's one of the big benefits of disassembling the car for paint, because all of those edges, like around that mirror, are places that you have to be very careful not to apply too much material in one little spot and cause major runs around the edges of, you know, those parts that are still in the car. Obviously, another disadvantage to not disassembling the car is going to be, the paint not being, you know, behind on those edges on the parts. But for this car, it's not a big deal. An advantage, and one reason why when I like this early 90s car we would leave it together, is because all that plastic is so brittle that, you know, there's a lot of times you want to take apart a car for paint and it breaks a lot of the stuff that you really just can't even get anymore. So that's another reason we left this car together.
So I'm mixing up a second coat of paint, or a second cup full of paint. Had to cut the exhaust fan on in there to clear out some of the overspray. And we'll finish this first coat up. And then wait. In this temperature, we're gonna wait at least, we'll wait about 15 minutes at least. 15 to 20 minutes. And on this coat of, this first coat, what we call flash, it's not gonna dry obviously in 15 to 20 minutes, but it'll be where we can put another coat of paint on top of it without the risk of it running. You can see on that first coat, what we're doing is applying just a good even coat. I've got the fan opened up on the gun really wide, running a 50% overlap on the fan spray, and going fairly slow. If you notice, while I'm spraying, I'm going fairly slow with my movement to let this stuff just build. You can't go too slow, otherwise it'll run. It's just something you'll have to feel. But the whole point of this video is promoting, you know, the guys starting out on building your cars for the first time, young and don't have a lot of money, or, you know, just the guy that's just on doing a budget build and not wanting to spend a lot of money. So we'll finish out this first coat. Alright guys, so here it is after the second coat. I didn't cut this camera back on for the second coat, but basically we're just doing the same thing we done the first time. I did leave the fan off for most of the second coat, trying to mitigate some of that trash flowing through here, the dust is pulling in. So it kind of left a black cloud of overspray a lot more, and I really didn't want it all over this camera. So but yeah, turned out good. Just a little bit of trash in the hood. Following the second coat, whenever I do the let's see, a walk around proof before I put the gun down, I'm not worried about the little bit of trash that's in it. What I would look for before I put the gun all the way down and cleaned it would be looking for any kind of dry spray, because anybody that's ever like sanded and buffed a car knows that's going to be almost impossible to get out. Is like any rough texture, dry spray. A little bit of run actually is not that big a deal. I didn't get any runs in this car, but that's not even a big a problem as like any kind of dry spray. So a little bit of trash is easy to get out. A run would be not the end of the world, but like I said, we just want to make sure we get this thing coated with plenty of material and keep it wet. So I'm gonna let this thing dry for like several hours. I'll probably come back out here before I go to bed tonight and pull the tape off the edges, and because I don't want the paint to like really dry right to the tape. So I'll pull this tape off while it's still soft and let it sit here and cure overnight. I'll probably turn the heater on, let this thing bake overnight, and then I'll pull it out tomorrow and go to get some sunlight. So I'll show you how it looks there. Alright, so there it is, how it turned out. Still got some cleanup work to do on the glass and edges and stuff, but really nice for the money and for the time spent on it. About 2 days probably total. A full day of repair and prep work, and another full day of finish sanding and paint. Probably spend a half a day buffing it and cleaning up the edges and buffing the headlights, and I'll come back and paint, take this apart and put a kind of like Rust-Oleum paint on the trim and little small stuff like that. But said for the money and time spent, I think it turned out really nice. This car's still gonna get some lowering springs and maybe some different wheels and tires. But it's gonna be for sale when it's ready, and it'll be daily driven until then. May see some track days and just have fun with it. But I hope this helps somebody, and I appreciate you guys.